Welcome back to the Lilyless podcast, where our goal is to be a handbook for the living. In episode 8, we chat with our friend Mishka Shubaly. Unfortunately, it's been some time since we've connected with Mishka, and this conversation reminded me of how much I enjoy throwing around ideas and getting deeper into the more important life topics with him. We dive into the ephemeral state of life and legacy, his youth, including being friends with a school shooter in Massachusetts, how music and writing became his life, and the mindset shifts that led to him being a brand new husband. As always, visit lilyless.com for more information on the podcast and platform. You can also contact us from the website if you have questions or ideas for people or topics you'd like to hear or see us cover. My initial idea was this whole Lily list, like, hey, end of life planning, do these things, right? That was it. And what I found in my product research, which was just me talking with people I know, no one likes to talk about that shit. No one wants to have it come up. No one wants to bring it up. So I shifted the initial phase to the ego. And the ego is stories and legacy, right? So it's not about end of life planning. It's about capturing your stories and thinking about your legacy and what do you want to leave behind. And so this podcast came out of that. And so that's what I'm doing is just talking with people and chatting about stories and asking about legacies. And that's why I wanted to reach out to you. So I figured we could just have a chat around that and see where it goes.
Curt, I have to tell you, it is a devilish question. You know, I try not to do any actual prep for podcasts, but I try to do some mental prep of thinking about the question, listening to episodes of the podcast, or you got to figure out sort of what you're getting into. And I've been thinking about this, and it has been it's been killing me because I feel like, first of all, I feel like most, if not all of what I've created in my life, will be ephemeral. It will be sort of replaced by, stuff that follows it. And I think the stuff that will endure is, sort of work that I've disavowed or songs that I don't play anymore, going back and sort of like listening to old songs or looking at old stories. I'm like, bro, you fucking what? I mean, I guess it's a good measure that I'm evolving as a person and as an artist, that I, look back at my earlier work and I'm like, this is dog shit. I don't know. I don't know that I've created anything that will endure, and I don't feel like I'm about to. I have
It's
another
funny
record.
though. So the interesting part about that is I feel exactly the same. I have 30 plus years, as I know you do, of recordings and writings and things that we put out. And really, for most of us, which is 99.99999% of the population, the impact we're going to have is with the 4 or 5 people we're really close to. And the generation that comes up after them, that, we impact them and they impact the generation after. And that's where I think the legacy part is so important is
So we've been doing these shows in my backyard here, or my side yard. And I think we've done whatever 16 or 17 shows in the last couple of years, where we have traveling comics or traveling songwriters come through and play a coffee table, that I found out in the alley and like dragged into my yard, and that's the stage. The and the shows, the worst show has been magical, and some of them have just been like, where your stomach is sore the next day from laughing so hard. Or like, my mom came to a show and laughed so hard she peed her pants, and I was like,
wow.
that's it. We did it. We won. And people are like, oh, you've got to record these, or you've got to live stream them, and I made a conscious decision not to, For one, there's like a lot of jokes that make sense in the context of hanging out in my backyard that then if it was recorded and edited and put up on the internet, like the not that anybody's going to get canceled because fucking canceling isn't real, but that people would get negative criticism for a joke taken out of context that landed, the
Yeah.
uh and but also I made sort of a concrete decision to try to create something ephemeral, to create something that wasn't going to last, that was the ultimate, like you had to be there,
Yeah.
that um you know get up off get up off your couch and come to a fucking show and experience it, and if you can't, then you won't,
Yeah.
and it's gotten me thinking a lot about um yeah, are we gonna do anything that lasts? Does it matter? um when I was when I was a teenager, and obsessed with songwriting and writing and creating something that lasted, sort of thought like, this is immortality, is to write fucking White Christmas, and then that song lives on and goes everywhere and sort of does everything. And then and now um I I think I accept more that there's this thing that happens with, sort of like three chord wonders. There was like CCR, and then there was the Ramones, and then
Yeah.
there was like Nirvana, and then there's Green Day. And each generation has their blistering three chord attack, that's like amazing to mow the lawn to when you're an angry 14-year-old. And then maybe you revisit it 20 years later and you're like, oh, I remember that. I remember feeling like that, but it doesn't really move you as much, The um I mean, maybe those bands are bad examples because I do think that CCR will persevere, and I think that and the Ramones and Nirvana and stuff like that. I hope the Green Day doesn't, but that's just me. The Sort of looking back on the songs that I've written and the stuff that I've done, I can sort of recognize that, maybe on a smaller scale, I've been sort of like Herman's Hermits, the there was a moment there where sort of it peaked and a lot of people were listening, and then it either gets eroded or covered up by a lot of the stuff that comes afterwards. I would love it if people were listening to my music and reading my books in 50 years, 100 years, but I'm picky. They probably wouldn't be listening to the songs I want them to listen to, and they probably wouldn't be reading the shit that I want them to read. The I think when I was starting out as a songwriter, I had this vision of I would be the guy to say the things that people were afraid to think, to uh, just be emotionally naked in a song, and to say, to stare into the abyss until the abyss stares back, to be a witness sort of to my own loneliness and my own fear and my own darkness. And I'm not saying it was an original concept or an original idea, but that's what I felt. And I think now, my friend Rad Pinkard, he's like 27 now, young guy, songwriter, sort of starting out and getting better with each track he records. And it's so hard to have these conversations without sounding like an arrogant piece of shit. The I don't think that I'm canon for Rad, that that he sees me as one of the greats, but I absolutely see that Rad took the ball that myself and some other songwriters were sort of kicking around, and he's run with it. That he is able to write about his feelings and his emotions and human darkness in a way that's really catchy and really intelligent, and and he's unafraid to sort of stand naked in a song. Um So hopefully that's something that I made a small contribution to. And, this another idea that's not new or novel is just the idea that you can change. You can make a record and then make another record that sounds nothing like it, and then make another record that refutes the things you were saying in those first two records. You know, um, you can be, you know, a drunk, narcissistically obsessed with his own loneliness, and then you can become a human being, you know? So I don't know. But also, I mean, I think there's this great quote from this movie, Lake Mungo, brilliant sort of horror mockumentary. This woman is talking about death after her daughter dies, and she says, death is like this big dumb machine that just keeps coming and coming and coming, and um, and that's true. And all the songs you write, all the books you write, all the albums you make, your show posters, um, you sort of throw them up as a barricade towards the darkness, and it's not going to fucking hold, man. We're all going to die,
Yeah.
and I think, for you and I, um, that we've had so much loss of, um, musicians we admired, people close to us, our collaborators. Um, Inevitably, you're like, well, it's never going to come for me, but if it does come for me, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think on one hand, you really have to struggle to create something that is going to persevere, that is going to stick around after you're gone. And also, you need to get real comfortable with the fact that it may not happen. Um, do you believe in any kind of afterlife?
You and I talked when you were last here about kind of trips and sort of mental um the ability to kind of change your mental chemistry and mindset. And afterlife for me, I believe that there is something bigger than we understand, and I believe that there's energies that are all around us. I went through my phase, I grew up in Boston. It was all Catholic church. I never felt comfortable with church. I never felt comfortable with this idea of God. It just never made sense to me. But I went through like, the atheist phase in my teen years. But you grow and you learn, and then you realize I don't know as much as I think I know. And when you get to that point, if I had to describe myself for the past 30 plus years, it's agnostic. I have no idea. So for me, I do think that there is something that we don't understand that happens. And I'll deal with that when I get to that bridge. I'll cross it and figure it out. But till then, it's like I got piles of dirt to move from one side to the other side of the yard. And so I'm just going to do that until I get there. So that's kind of my take on it.
I'm like you. I remember being a little kid walking outside one day and like looking up at the sky and being like, nah, there's nothing up there. That's, and since that day, my lack of faith has never wavered. I've never been like, well, maybe there is a God, and I was, sort of like, um, a Gervais, like annoying atheist when I was like 16.
Yeah.
And then, um, and having, happily been, atheist for a long time, then I smoked DMT, and now I'm like, well, fuck, what I know is that I have no fucking idea what's going on. So, I'm, which is not to say that I'm hedging my bets and like, oh, I think there's, elephant headed alien gods, but just that, that experience really established to me like how little my tiny brain, can grasp. Um, I do I do like to think I have like a corny thing that I think about that sort of like to bring myself comfort. I like to think that when we die, we'll be reunited with all of our pets. I would love to see my dogs again.
Yeah.
And more than that, as long as we're like going off into fucking woo-woo shit, they need to be able to talk, because for all of my life, every dog I've ever had, they look up at you that like they're like, "Man, there's something I got to tell you." And you're like, tell me, and our whole lives, like they never do, and so when I die, I want to be greeted in some ASPCA afterlife where all my pets have like gathered together at a dive bar or something. And they're like, man, we've been waiting for you to get here. Like,
Yeah.
holy shit, sit down. Like we got a lot of catching up to do.
Well, you mentioned your mom and you mentioned some of the I thought it was interesting when you said, when you were writing and performing is to be sort of completely naked and go to those dark things. And one of the things that I've been asking people as I think about stories is like childhood growing up. And I don't know that you and I have ever discussed that. I think there's always been other things to chat about, but what was your childhood? What were some of the events maybe that shaped or drove you to this place where you felt like this is how I want to make my art, right? I want to be naked. I want to go to those dark places.
I mean, I think, when I was a kid, my parents took me to see, and I never found out this guy's name, and I'm sure he's sort of been like lost to the ages. But we, grew up in small town Canada, and we went to like a restaurant one night, um, and there was a guy in a wheelchair playing guitar and making dirty jokes in between songs. And I still remember that experience. That was like the primal scene for me, and just seeing that guy and watching the room react to him and being like, Mom, Dad, fuck your dreams. This is what I'm going to do. This is who I will be. And that happened very early for me. I was probably like 5 or 6. And
Your parents brought you here. Did they know that this performer was going to be like, were these shades of your parents that they would bring you to this, or was it just like accidental that it happened?
I really don't know. I mean, the town that we lived in was small enough that, I don't know, 30 or 40 years ago, places would advertise, live music, and people would just go see music. And
Yeah.
then, now, places sort of advertise, comedy, and people would just go and see comedy, like a genre. And I think that our town was so small that it was just like entertainment,
Yeah.
a human being, that there was just like a guy there, singing and telling jokes. And that was enough of a draw. Um, I had, this sort of small b bipolar childhood that like, um, on the one hand, I had this sort of magical childhood with my mother. She was an incredible mom and still is. And then my dad was sort of actively disinterested in the kids. And I was like a sensitive kid. I had a hard time at school, and I remember crying and begging my mother, not to go, and getting picked on. And I think, those two poles, sort of like set me up to become who I became and to create the kind of art that I create, which on the one hand, I do try and be um emotionally vulnerable, but also eventually I learned to be tough, you know, and that um I think that, if I am able to toot my own horn about my songs, it's to say that like they have heart and they're tough, that there's there's something about them that like I'm still here, you never got me down, or
Yeah.
you got me down but you never got me out, you know. Um there's something about sort of like still hanging in there. Yeah, so I mean I think that's, I mean it's weird too because there's some stuff that definitely came from my parents and the way that they parented and the way that they treated us as kids. But then also like always loved Chuck Berry. That has just been my sort of like, that was my gateway drug to everything. And then years ago, I was sort of writing a longer piece about rock and roll and the role that it's played in my life. And I went back and realized that my experience of Chuck Berry opening that door for me, it wasn't Chuck Berry. It was fucking Michael J. Fox doing Chuck Berry in Back to the Future.
Yeah.
So like I had imagined this sort of like authentic rock and roll experience of, the, sort of rhythm and blues from a black guitar player. And it's like, no, it's a white Canadian actor,
Yeah.
just like the fakest shit ever. But also, that it worked, it sent me down that path.
All of us being people that I know, or I'm close with, is like the Ramones. And we all think the Ramones, they're like these punk rock icons and everything. And I always think of like when people bring up Jesus and Christianity, and I always think Jesus was just trying to get people to be better Jews. And it was like the Ramones were just trying to bring back 50s rock. Like
Yeah.
that's all that they were trying to do, And
Yeah.
we sort of took that and then morphed it into this whole thing that was punk rock and everything that came along with that. So yeah,
And, and the Beatles were a Chuck Berry cover band,
yeah,
and they got it wrong,
yeah,
and thank God that they did, because like by fucking it up, they, created a whole entire thing, a whole entire other thing, which is now terribly annoying, but also, we're grateful to have them to get sick of, you know.
and, yeah. And so, did you like high school? I mean, did that carry on as far as not liking school and bullied? And did you get through college? What was kind of that education piece from 16 to 22 or so?
I left high school when I was 15. I left after my sophomore year. I got accepted into like a college level early admission program.
Okay.
And by that point, sort of, it's like everything was starting to peak. Like I was getting in fights at school, and I'd started like getting drunk and like getting into shit. And, but also my parents figured out that like, I think, I was like one semester I got like all C's, and then they were like, we'll give you $50 for every A you get next semester. And I was like, fucking, I'll do it. And I got straight A's the next semester. So I like proved that I could do it. And then that sort of set me up to go for this, early college program. And then, so I went away. We were living in New Hampshire at the time. I went away to a small school in Massachusetts in the fall of 92. And that winter, one of my classmates got an assault rifle and shot 6 people at our school. And the next day I found out that my parents were getting a divorce. And then the next year we like lost the house. I had to testify in this murder trial. And it was like
What
I
school was
went
that?
what's that?
What school was that?
Simon's Rock College. But, to put it bluntly, it fucking sucked, and it was really like I woke up a kid one day, and then the next day I was a man with a man's problems. After that, I really spun out, man. I mean, it was, I had these two impulses of trying to, like get revenge by having a good life, and trying to like restore my mother after, after our family lost everything. And then also just the teenage thing of like, I just want to fucking destroy. And so I sort of like went back and forth between those two poles. Took me a long time to get my college degree. I got my degree when I was 20. When I was 21, I moved to New York with $300. Started grad school when I was 22, got out of grad school when I was 24. And then when I was 26, I was like, this is fucking bullshit. I'm just going to live out of bars and play music. And when I was 26, I lived out of a van for a year, on tour nonstop. And I had this idea that like, doing this, dumb heroic thing of like, living out of the van nonstop, just like life on tour, that at the end of that year, I would make a record of all the songs I had written. And then that, a little indie label would put that record out, and then it would change my life.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened. But it was a much longer time frame I imagined. And, the changes when they come when they came were sort of incremental and, um, much smaller, much slower, much less glorious than I had conceptualized. But it did actually work, man. It's wild.
So what was it? So, I think you brought us up to living in the van and getting your songs on a label. I can't remember how long ago it was that we met. Probably 7, 8 years ago.
Something like that, I think.
But
Yeah.
so between 26 and you must have been early 40s, I'm guessing, when we met.
Yeah, yeah. The
What was what I seem to recall, like, I met you, and what I got from you just sharing, I love the sort of honest, authentic self that you bring. Um, but B, I also kind of got that you always had kind of this sort of hard exterior, but once you connected with somebody, is sort of very open, very kind of empathetic person. And so, when I meet people like that, it's like you can tell that they've had a life, right? Multiple lives. And so between that time, kind of, what was that like? How did you become an adult? When I met you, you'd already put out your book and quit drinking, and were running ultra marathons at that point. So
yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of ground to cover there, between 26 and getting my shit together. I toured for a year and then I came back to New York and I was like totally exhausted and defeated. And I had a relationship end and went into a spiral and then started playing with this band Beat the Devil. Um because I was sort of like, I'm going to give up on my own music career. Like, this is fucking hopeless. Like, I just need to get a gig playing bass in a band. And that's, sort of how I'll do it. So for a while there, I played bass in a bunch of bands in New York, did less with my stuff. And in that time period, that's when Stanhope discovered my stuff and then started, playing it on the podcast and sort of blasting it out there. And that really brought like new life to my career. But but by that point, I've been sort of like going too hard for too long. And when I was 32, I finally got sober. And, the sober version of me felt totally antithetical to this sort of cult of alcohol, or cult of alcoholism that, I was like writing about and living. And so for 5 years, I didn't do any solo shows. I didn't, I was just like, oh, that shit's dead. Um, and I started writing and publishing, with Amazon. I started running, sort of started moving into my sober life. Um, at that same time, podcasts were blowing up and Stanhope's podcast was blowing up. And he was using some of my music for the theme song. And so, sort of like every once in a while, I would sort of like one day I would wake up and I would have 200 new followers on Twitter. And I was like, holy shit. And it was like, oh, Stanhope dropped a new podcast, that my music's mentioned on or whatever. And then JT reached out to me and was like, hey, if you ever want to go on tour, and I had the book coming out. So I was like, maybe it's time to try to. I had finished a new record that was sort of like this lost record that I had started, but then was so fucked up I couldn't finish. So I finished that record. I had a book coming out, and I was like, I'm going to return to working the road, and that was a huge mistake. the and I will never forgive JT for dragging me back into the fucking mire like that. But no, that was also it was a really exhausting and really gratifying stretch. I got to go to, I had UK labels putting my stuff out and, got to go over to Europe several times and do, I'd always been able to sort of string together like a very budget, DIY and die tour. But finally I was like headlining places and like I would come home from tour with money and it was bizarre and great. And then, you know, 2019, I felt like I was getting to the end of it, where I had been touring again really hard for 5 years. And touring sober, you got to be really committed because I think so much of the compensation that we receive on the road is in the form of, alcohol and other intoxicants or attention, shitty food, and I was trying to make this change in my life of like exercising and eating better and feeling better and um trying to, you know, erase the addiction living within me and everything on the road reinforces addiction stuff, and I never drank, but I would come home from tour feeling very much hungover and just exhausted and like, had done everything but drink. Um,
I
and
remember
so,
the sweet potatoes in the cup holders.
yes, yeah, yeah. And, life gets pretty busted, but, and then like 2019, I sort of felt like I was getting to the end of it. And then I had a tour booked for 2020, all over, a month in Europe. And then in 36 hours, all of those dates canceled. And then we embarked on the biggest bummer of our lives, together and separately. Um, and now like, man, I don't know. It would take a lot to get me back on the road now. Not shitting on Amarillo, but like I've been to Amarillo. I don't really feel a burning need to go back. If things change for me dramatically, like, yeah, of course I would. I'm a recidivist like anyone else. But to go back to tour, floors are much harder now than they used to be. To go back to touring the way that I did when I was like 30, it would just
Yeah.
be impossible.
It's interesting hearing when I chat with my friends who've made a living in the arts. And I know you've also done, teaching and classes and stuff like that. But it's funny though, when I ask about kind of stories and bringing up everything is like, okay, as a kid, this is how I got into this, and then once I was into it, this is what I did, and then this is what I've done, right? And everything is like around creation and touring, which is great. But what I don't hear a lot of is kind of that, because growing up, I remember DRI put out this album, Thrash Zone, and there was a song on there called The Trade. And the trade was about music trade, right? It was an artist trade, entertainment trade, and everything you kind of have to give up. And so what I don't hear a lot about is kind of those relationships. You mentioned a relationship that had broken up, but there's not a whole lot when I talk with my traveling and creating friends that's around those deep connections that are made. And I know they're out there, but it's easy to kind of stay at the higher level, the professional level. And I'm just curious as you've gone, you mentioned JT and Stanhope, but even before that, when you were younger, I mean, were there individuals or relationships that kind of helped you along positively or negatively, right? So it's like, was there somebody that helped you move forward in a positive way, or was there something that was so negative that you said, fuck this, I got to go and do something different to get out there?
The musicians who inspired me the most were the guys who were in my first band. You know, Zachary Lopez has gone on to be a pretty successful music writer. He writes for Cream. He has a band called Publicist UK that seems to have done pretty well. He and I played together in a band called Fresh Kills for a long time, but we never really did. Or I feel like we wrote good songs and made good records, but it just sort of never really caught on. But Zach's writing was a huge influence on my writing, and certainly inspired me to sort of like that. You never had to get a fucking straight job. That you could just do this forever. And then my friend James Sparber. Zach and James and I were in a band together when we were like 16 or 17. And James is an incredible musician, taught me how to play bass. He produced one of my records for me. Um, and he plays on the upcoming record. He like introduced me to the birthday party when I was
Yeah.
15. It was just like that cooler older friend who was like, "Oh, you should listen to this band. You should check this out." And he was super serious about music and just like, investing everything and anything into it. When We Were Animals, that's the record that James produced. So it was really those guys, like my friends and my peers, who encouraged me. Lanigan, I got to be friends with, much later in life. And he, it was a tremendous gift to know that guy. And also, like, when one of the best, man, it diminishes your own work in your head.
Yeah.
I was very reluctant to send him songs I was working on.
Thinking about legacy, we touched on this a bit at the beginning and about the artistic front. I did hear you just got married, which is a surprise to me. I would have to say, if I had a bingo card, Mishka getting married was probably not on that card. So thinking about that, though, I mean, there had to be, Mark. I know him passing, and obviously he left a massive legacy on the creative front, right? As far as the inspiration for other artists and things like that. I'm sure, knowing a bit about his story, he also left a lot of pain behind with some of the things that happened in his life. So for you, thinking about a marriage now, at this point in your life, I mean, was there something that shifted? Was it just you just met somebody that completely changed your mind on that, or are you starting to think about kind of the future at this point?
I mean, it was sort of several things, coming together at the same time.
And by the way, congratulations. I'll just say that too. So.
Thank you, thank you. I think what we look to love to do is to make the impossible possible.
Yeah.
And I had I was I was out in Ohio by myself all summer last summer, and Athens is a beautiful little town, but it's a college town. So in the summertime, all the college kids leave, and it's a fucking ghost town. And it was sort of like just me alone with my thoughts. And I was like, I was 46 at the time, and I and being alone for that window, like living in Phoenix, my mom lives 5 doors down. It's awesome. I lived on the opposite side of the country from her for like 20 years and would see her for like 1 week out of the year. And now we're buddies and I can go over there for coffee. She's a big part of my life now and it's awesome. And I'm super grateful for that. But being in Ohio by myself, it gave me a window into what my life would be like when she's gone if I didn't make room in my life for another person. And I was like, man, I'm just going to get fucking older and weirder and lonelier. And nobody wants to watch this movie, especially me. Like, if, you know, unless I'm like really fucking strapped in and ready for the horror show of being like a lonely, bitter, sober alcoholic, fucking white knuckling it towards doom. Like, I gotta find a way to sort of like, let these walls down and let somebody in. And around the same time, I met this woman who was, a graphic designer and a musician and loves all animals and doesn't care about having the fucking dog in the bed and cat hair on everything. It's impossible to have too many guitars, and in my life, I feel like I've been able to make red flags out of nowhere,
Yeah.
and just be like, oh yeah. Yeah. I remember being on a date with this girl and she didn't like Keith Richards' singing voice. And I was like, this will never work out. Like, that's a fucking deal breaker right there. But with Alejandra, like, as much as I was searching for deal breakers, there were none to be had. She really is, she's a wonderful person. And um, the, the person that she is, the quality of person made a lot of things possible for me that wouldn't have been possible other. There have been a lot of opportunities in my life that I've slept on or I've fucked up. And with this one, I was like, man, this is fucking it. Either, you either fucking send it, you get on this train and ride it to the end of the line, or you fucking don't. And I was like, man, I've done everything else. I've tried every drug I could find, every fucking weird, fucked up thing that I could do. I've played every guitar. I've done every show. I've been everywhere. This is the final. True love is the final perversion. Like, this is the last weird, fucked up thing for me to do is to invest in a relationship with another human being, And 2 weeks in, I gotta say, man, I'm killing this fucking marriage thing. I'm kicking ass. Has it been 2 weeks? Maybe it's been a week. Whatever. It feels like 2 weeks. I'm doing great. I'm dominating it. It's been great. When I was sort of kicking around this idea of like whether we get married or not, my mom, very practical person, she was like, let's don't rush into it. And I was talking to my buddy Oscar, who lives across the street, and he was like, Mishka, you're 47 years old. It's too late for you to rush into it. Like, fucking, like, do or die.
You're on the downside of the bell curve at this point.
Yeah, like, you've waited so long, like, if this is something you want to do, then go for it, And yeah, so grateful for that input.
So how does that change your view of legacy, or does it? So, we talked at the beginning about the artistic side, but when you think about maybe you're around 10 years or 20 years or 30 years or however long you still got, it ends at some point. And so you've got someone else attached to you now and somebody else helping to make decisions. And how does that change your view of the future?
Man, it's weird. It's a lot of adjustment because, I really honestly plan to be dead by 30.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, man, I really fucked this up. And now I'm the oldest I've ever been. And, I want to keep living. I just want to keep going. The, I think a lot of my friends, they were super invested in music and then they got married and then their, priorities changed. The cool thing about getting married at 47 is that, like, I have a vasectomy. We're not going to have kids. But Alejandra's from Venezuela. So she's never been to Amarillo.
Yeah.
So for her, Amarillo is like a foreign country,
Yeah.
So what may actually happen, I got to finish this fucking record before I do anything. Cause like I've toured as a way of means of procrastinating, finishing records. But, once I get this record done, like, maybe she and I will go on the road together. She's been singing and playing bass with me. She's going to learn how to play keys, to drive around America again would be a fucking bummer. To drive around America with somebody who's never been to New Mexico, to fucking South Carolina, to Louisiana, you know what I mean? To show all these places to somebody for the first time, like, that could be super fun.
Yeah.
And as far as like my legacy, like, I don't know, man. I think, ironically, having a musical or a literary legacy felt so much more important when I was 17 and doing shit that was kind of throwaway.
Yeah.
And now, like, I just want to have fun with like my family and my friends and my wife. And I want to make my dog very happy every single day of her life. I want to, I just want to like have fun and enjoy stuff. I want to keep creating, but it doesn't, when you get validation in other forms of like repairing relationships with your family or finding your person, then to get that validation that you get from, a crowd from singing into a microphone, it just feels less urgent.
Yeah. Are you have you done anything with legally wills, things of that nature?
Yeah, when COVID hit, I was like, Mom, we got to get our shit together. And my mom and I, or she updated her will, and I wrote one. You know, I hope I don't die yet because I
Yeah.
still have like a ton of guitars to put back together, and like, you know, um, I have sort of mountains of guitar parts, and I fear that somebody would just come in and be like, "Yeah, fucking just throw it in the dumpster." I'm
Yeah.
like, but those screws are from a 1962, like the um. So yeah, I have a lot of organizing left to do before I'm ready to die. But but I did do a will. One of the things I've found is that I decided very early on, like when I was a child, I figured out that I wouldn't have kids because I knew what it was like being around my dad and knowing that he would be happier if I wasn't around.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, I'm never going to make a kid feel like that. That fucking sucks.
Yeah.
And my older sister had 4 kids. And now that she's done all the heavy lifting of like changing diapers and like dealing with teenage bullshit, like her kids are awesome. They're so cool. You know, I love hanging out with them. They're like, I mean, my niece Coco just turned 18 and she officiated our wedding. And
Yeah.
my nephew Mika was my best man. And like Kai was the ring bearer and Brianna was Alejandra's maid of honor, and it was so important to me and so meaningful to me to have my sister's kids involved in the wedding.
Yeah.
And the it always comes as a surprise to me. They love their fucking weird old uncle.
Yeah.
They were stoked. They were totally into it. Um, so yeah, just want to hang out with them too. And try I try to be, the guy to show them that like it's okay to cry when you're a guy. That
Yeah.
you don't have to be a fucking to be a macho piece of shit. And also like if you get locked up, call me before you call your mom
Yeah.
and I will help, you know.
I knew that I
Yeah.
was selfish, and that was the one thing I didn't want to do was bring a kid into an environment where I was going to be selfish because I feel like to do it right, and a lot of people push back on this when I say it, but my belief, right? So as somebody who doesn't have a lot of belief systems, I think if you're, in my mind, if I was going to have a kid, I'd want to be there, just like my dogs and everything else. And I didn't feel like I could make that commitment in my 20s or 30s, and so I just avoided it.
See, I would argue that that's the opposite of selfish.
Yeah.
That because I know a lot of people, you know, I don't less now, but maybe 10 or 15 years ago, where I would be like, "Oh, I can't believe you had a kid," and they're like, "Yeah, but I still party." I'm
Oh
like,
yeah.
"Well, fucking what? Then why'd you have the kid?" Like
Yeah.
if you're gonna do that, then fucking do it. And I have a lot of friends who are like, nah, man, I can't hang out. I'm gonna be with my kid. And I respect them way more than my buddies who are like, yeah, no, let's get a fucking bag of blow,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
to try to live both lives. Cause I think I honestly what this world needs is not more unwanted children. What this world needs more of is cool uncles.
Yeah.
And and that's a role that when fucking Roe versus Wade got overturned, I sent both my nieces 2 things of Plan B. Because that's the male influence that I want to have
Yeah.
on their lives. I want to be realistic about where they are in their lives and that nobody's perfect, and fucking accidents happen and shit. And I want them to know that like this isn't a women's problem. This
Yeah.
is a human issue. Um and yeah, I I don't think it's selfish at all to pursue your dreams. I think it's selfish to drag a fucking kid along while you're still living. I think it takes
Or to leave the
insight.
kid behind. I mean, that's the thing. That was what I was worried about. So
Yeah, yeah. I think it takes insight and self knowledge to know like this is what I'm capable of and this is what I'm not capable of. You know, and I'm capable of fucking taking care of my dog and my cat. They have awesome lives.
yeah.
And I still maintain that I would have been a shitty parent.
Well, I appreciate your time. I know we're over. It's nice seeing you. It's been a while.
Yeah, man, it's been a
Um,
long time.
I hope if you guys do hit the road, plan a couple days here, come by and we can hang out and show your new bride the sights and sounds of Greensboro, North Carolina. So
Absolutely, absolutely. And I want to say too, like that I know that you've really been a port in the storm for JT and Eddie. And I really appreciate that. You know, one of the things that I think keeps underground music and underground art in general going in America is uh just a small group of super committed people who are like, oh yeah, no, I'm gonna do the things to keep this going. And you're certainly one of them. So I really appreciate that.
yeah, I appreciate it. I feel like I'm empathetic as, I spent a lot of time trying to do whatever the hell I was trying to do, which I didn't really know what I was doing. I was like spinning my wheels for a long time. Cool, man. Well, I'm gonna let you go. I don't know if you got 2 minutes. I'll see if Serena wants to say hello to you. I'm sure she'd like to see you. So
Yeah, absolutely.
You can't hang on to yourself. You don't have to try not to hang on to yourself. It can't be done. And that is salvation. The most important thing for anyone to realize is that you and every person you see will soon be dead.